Hello, my friends. I'm recording this from one of my favorite spots in Santa Fe. If you're ever out here, drive up the mountain and go to Big Tsusuke Campground and just kind of walk up along the creek. Right now, there's snow on the ground. Maybe you can hear it crunching under my feet. And I'm at one of my favorite spots at my favorite spot, which is a little camping area pretty well off the main trail. And when it's warm, I'll take clients up here and we'll do breath work and energy work. The spot is kind of between two little forks of the creek that runs up here. So there's the sound of running water, the trees. The place feels very alive. It's really beautiful. So I'm continuing my tour of recording field notes in the field as we get ready to leave Santa Fe. And I wanted to share this spot with you. I'm also recording this on MLK Day, January 19th, 2026. I don't talk about it much, but I have sort of an interesting relationship with the work and legacy of Dr. King, and I didn't realize this, but growing up, his friends, other civil rights leaders, Jack Odell, Bernard Lee, Jim Bevel, who were all, some of them Jack led the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Bernard was Dr. King's, now we'd call him a body man, but like assistant, kind of his right-hand man, like Hamilton was to George Washington. But these guys were family friends, and they would come over, and I have this really vivid memory of being in third grade, and it was speech day. We all had to prepare a speech, and I had a famous speech, not one that we wrote, and I had been assigned Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech. And so Bernard came over, and in retrospect, he must have been younger than I am now. I'm 49 now. He must have been in his late 30s. And he came over and we listened to a LP of the speech on a record player, and he coached me on Dr. King's cadences. So if you want to have fun, imagine a little kind of undersized, very, very white child who was pretty quiet going into his third grade classroom and sitting in the corner. And then when it's his turn, he comes up with those little index cards and he's trembling and he busts out with these, very conventional Southern Baptist cadences, and almost as if the speech had been scored like a speech from Shakespeare. I actually think that's where I learned about the power of language beyond words, the power of cadence, the power of energy. And I just grew up with that. I grew up in that post-civil rights movement era, going to like the 20th anniversary march to commemorate the "I Have a Dream" speech in Washington. And I didn't really have a deep understanding of what any of that meant, or what an incredible gift it was to grow up with some of these amazing minds and amazing men, um, as family friends, as mentors at times, and as guides, as teachers. I'm really, really grateful for that. And I also thought it would be a nice day to share some of Dr. King's words. And these are words that I wasn't familiar with until recently. It comes from the last Christmas Eve sermon he ever gave at Ebenezer Baptist Church. And it was just a few months before he was assassinated. And there's so much in here as I was reading through it that it's almost as if, and this is the case with so many great teachers who spoke from a place deeper than the current moment, there's so much of it that resonates right now. I'll just pick a few quotes. Maybe we can sit with them. Now let me suggest first that if we are to have peace on earth, our loyalties must become ecumenical rather than sectional. Our loyalties must transcend our race, our tribe, our class, and our nation, And this means we must develop a world perspective. No individual can give alone, and as long as we try, the more we're going to have war in this world. No individual can live alone, and as long as we try, the more we're going to have war in this world seems to speak so precisely to the experience we're having in our culture, where we've created a culture that's so individualistic, where we can get our needs met anytime in the US, for the most part, with the press of a button, that whether we like it or not, we're cut off from one another. We don't rely on one another. Those kind of light community ties, those moments of small interaction at the grocery store, they're just going away. And without that, what Dr. King says is the more we're going to have war in this world, the more we labor under the illusion that we're not all connected, the more likely it becomes that we're going to have war. And he goes on to share about a trip he took to India and what he learned. And again, going back to his words, it really boils down to this, that all life is interrelated. We're all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality tied into a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. We are made to live together because of the interrelated structure of reality. We are made to live together because of the interrelated structure of reality. There's something deeply ancient in that, almost animistic, although he was very much in the Christian tradition, but this idea that there's something in the way that everything is designed, that it's all interrelated. Me, the river flowing behind me, these trees around me, even the snow. It's not just people. I think Dr. King focused on, peace towards our fellow humans. And what's become so clear to me over the years is that it's bigger than that. We are in an interrelated, interwoven fabric and tapestry of reality. He then goes on to talk about the means of how we get somewhere really mattering. There's some beautiful quotes that he has about this. He stands up an argument that he's heard that if you're seeking to develop a just society, the important thing is to get there, and the means are really unimportant. And then he goes on to say, as we've talked about in these little field notes, that the way we get there is important because it is the soil, it creates the root from which everything else grows. So if you're going to have what you call a free society, and at the root is inequity, at the root is othering and dehumanizing, at the root is extraction, then that will inevitably, whether today, tomorrow, or 50, 100 years from now, filter upwards and infect the entire structure. There's something else he says that I think speaks directly to what's happening in this moment politically in the world. It's one of the strangest things that all the great military geniuses of the world have talked about peace, the conquerors of old, who came killing in pursuit of peace. Alexander, Julius Caesar, Charlemagne, and Napoleon were akin in seeking a peaceful world order. If you will read Mein Kampf closely enough, you will discover that Hitler contended that everything he did in Germany was for peace. And the leaders of the world today talk eloquently about peace. Every time we drop our bombs in North Vietnam, President Johnson talks eloquently about peace. What's the problem? They're talking about peace as a distant goal, as an end we seek. But one day we must come to see that peace is not merely a distant goal we seek, but that it is a means by which we arrive at that goal. We must pursue peaceful ends through peaceful means. All of this is saying, in the final analysis, means and ends must cohere because the end is pre-existent in the means, and ultimately destructive means cannot bring about constructive ends. I really recommend reading the entire sermon. It's beautiful and it's so filled with wisdom. And there's a sense in it that he knew at a soul level or somehow that he was in his last few months as an embodied being on the planet. I wanted to really honor Dr. King's words as I stand here in this forest in the snow, and really let them land. What does it mean to walk through the world as peace, to allow peace, to allow that deep, deep knowing that we are all interdependent and interrelated, to let that be the absolute root, the seed of all of our actions, all of our decisions? What if that became a primary metric for my decisions, for your decisions, for all of our collective decisions? Is this action, is my way of being right now, is this policy, is this governance structure, does it come from a place of knowing and feeling that we're all interconnected and therefore we must honor and be honored as living beings? Or does it come from a desire to control, to dominate, to other, to excel, even at the expense of all that is? For so long, I think many of our individual and collective decisions have been made, whether knowingly or unknowingly, from that latter place. Some of it out of malice or out of fear, some of it out of lack of awareness. But it feels like part of what's happening at a collective level is the veil is dropping. That lack of awareness is transforming one little bit at a time to awareness. And once we become aware, now we are more responsible for our decisions. Whether that's how we treat our partner, how we treat our children, our pets, our coworkers, how we orient to our work. And all of that is there in these beautiful words and invitations from Dr. King. So I want to take a moment just to breathe with his memory. And the other thing that comes up as we do this is that he wasn't and never claimed to be a perfect human. He was deeply flawed. And I remember hearing conversations between Bernard, my parents, about that tension between the message he carried and his humanity. And I even think that there's a beautiful invitation in that, is it doesn't have to be perfect. That the perfection is in the practice. The perfection is in the practice. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.